realized that there is very little resemblance between the outline and the novel. That somewhere along the line I had taken my outline and just kicked the crap out of it.
But you know,
and so
it's here's a fun analogy for you. It's like Freudian psychology. By that, what I mean is, I don't know very, and I'm a psychologist. I don't know very many psychologists who believe in Freud's theories today. But if he hadn't said these things, people would have responded to them with other ideas. And that initial outline that you then deviate, repudiate, what have you, is your starting point. And it's like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to do this. And it's the pebble in your shoe.
well, in what and now when I think of the story, I don't begin work until I have a pretty good idea, beginning, middle, and end, where that book is going to go. And that's when I actually begin working on it. And like you, I researched like crazy before and make a big fat notebook just full of stuff that I need to have. And you're doing historical research, I'm doing scientific research, or sometimes it can be historical too. I mean, the alternate history novel, I do a lot of real life research, history, as well as the alternative stuff. But then I began work. But I think the main reason why I stopped outlining per se is because I felt like if I put it all down on paper, then I was somehow locked into that. Whereas if I didn't deliberately outline, and I kept, or outline on paper, the outline is up here in the head, then I could change things subtly as I go along. I mean, I just did that in the chapter of the book that I'm now working on. A character that initially I thought was going to be introduced towards the end of the book. I realized it would work a lot better if I brought him in earlier and did this. And it was almost a spontaneous thing where I was working at the typewriter and I realized, wait a second, this is a good time for this person to make an entrance on stage. And when I got that in there, there's been the drawback of this is that there are times when you can make this spontaneous change and you get 3, 4, X many pages into it and you say, no, this is not working. And you got to go back to where you started.
Unfortunately, the audience only sees the final version. They don't know you did that.
That is the most important thing, and one of the most important things to remember is that all of this stuff is background. The only thing that counts in the long run is what the reader is going to see.
Okay, so I want to hit this problem from a different perspective because they're still hoping we're going to get the secret.
I'm still hoping we're going to get
it. So a few years ago, I was at the Nebula Awards. And it's like Saturday morning, and we're all gathering and having our bagels and schmear. And there's Joe Haldeman. You know who Joe Haldeman is?
Oh yeah.
Good son. Okay. So I go up to Joe, the plucky younger writer that I am, or was, and I say, Joe, what's your process? And he says, Lawrence, I write 1,000 words a day. I said, Joe, I write 1,000 words a day. You know the difference between us? You keep all of yours. and you know it's a joke, but it's also very true. And I have found the way I measure my growth and improvement as a writer is how much of that first draft I get to keep, how much of it I get right the first time, and how much I have to go back and just throw entire reams of paper away. So, esteemed colleagues on this panel, what are your experiences in this regard? You write it once and say, it has come to me from God, I wouldn't change a word? Do you say, my editor will fix it in post? What do you do?
As I mentioned before, I revise as I go. It's just how I work, and it's a, I said, it's a second or third draft by the time I type the last sentence. Then I set it aside, and I do go back. And because you always can revise and make it better. And sometimes years later, I'll go back. I wrote a Fantasy a Witch story several years ago, sent it to the markets, and never sold it, so I pulled it and set it aside. And I guess in the back of my head, it was always percolating, so I started rewriting it. Because I was like, okay, it was a pretty happy ending, everything. No, I realized it changed from 2 viewpoint characters to 1.
And killed them all by the last.
Pretty much gonna destroy the world at the end. End of the story.
Yeah, I love destroying worlds.
And so, but what I did, and this is the first time.
When these things are happening, changing that much, you need to step back and look at the relationships in your life. And say, am I a happy person?
But what I did for this story, I've never done this before, because I was, a blank page rewrite. I wrote the last 2 paragraphs first. And it's really interesting knowing that everything I'm doing now is driving toward those 2 paragraphs. And I'm really curious to see, I'm still literally in the middle of rewriting the story. I'm curious to see how it turns out, and hopefully it'll sell this time it makes the rounds. Yeah.
Hemingway said that the most valuable gift a writer can have is a foolproof, shock-resistant bullshit detector. And
You're making that up.
No, that's a Hemingway quote. Only lightly paraphrased. It took me a long time to realize what he meant by that. I thought it meant that it was detecting other people's bullshit, but really what he meant was his own bullshit. And you don't get one ready-made. You got to build it yourself over time. I think I've got a pretty good bullshit detector now, and that's what I turn on when I sit down and I write. And I write when I start writing a story or a novel. I'll write until the bullshit detector goes off. And what it means is that I've written something that's bullshit. And then at that point, I stop and I go back to the very beginning of the story and I begin to do a rewrite. And I work my way through until I hit the place. Somewhere along the line, I hit whatever it is that caused the detector to go off. And I keep going. And I keep going until the bullshit detector goes off again. And I stop. And I go all the way back to the beginning. And I begin working my way through. And somewhere along the line, I fix whatever it was. And so that's the way that I work. You go and you write. You go back and you go back to the beginning, rewrite. Write a little more, stop, go back, rewrite, go a little bit more, and just start, stop method until I get all the way to the end. And occasionally going back and fixing little things as I go along. You realize, it's a funny thing. It's my routine is that I get up in the morning early, between 5 and 6.
Don't say that. That's the next question. We're gonna get to that.
Oh, no.
No. I'm using my what's the word? My moderator power here.
No, this is
Shut up, Steele!
Anyway,
I want to say that for so long. Mary, does it come to you perfect the first time?
Of course not. I think anybody gets it that way than Charles Dickens. I edit as I go along, and